Welcome to my bookshelf tour. In my apartment tour video, I mentioned doing a possible bookshelf tour, so some people requested it. I counted all my books. I have 236 books. At the top of my bookshelf, all these items I already explained in my New York City apartment tour video, so if you missed that, you can watch that. I have it organized mostly by size and shape and color. Fulton Sheen books. Salvation is from the Jews. So I heard him speak. He has such an amazing conversion story. Used to be Jewish, became Catholic, had these incredible visions. So it was really cool to meet him and to hear his conversion story. This is a really intense book, really amazing. Into the Wild. I remember watching the movie and I was just so struck by his story. So then I read the book. Angels, Catholic and Christian. So this book, I remember when I was first learning about Catholicism, Christianity, like what's the difference between like Protestant, evangelical, Christian versus Catholic. And so I found this book really helpful in answering a lot of the questions that I had. I think this was just one of those like $3 books from Barnes & Noble. Pope Francis, Love and Responsibility, before he was John Paul II, and Father James Martin. I heard him speak at St. Ignatius, and he gave such a good talk about humor and the life of faith. And then Jane Goodall, really cool story about this. I bought this really cheap at a local bookstore in my neighborhood, and then I found out that she actually signed it. So that was just lucky. So I didn't meet her, but I have a signed copy of the book. And then another book, kind of the differences of Catholicism versus non-denominational Christianity. And then this, Labor Day, I don't really read a lot of fictional books, but this is just such a good story. I remember going to Goodall one day and it was like $1. And this is about a single mother and her son, and they're in the store one day and they see this man who's bleeding and they take him in and he's escaped from jail, and it's like their love story between the mom and this man, and so they kind of hide him out. So yeah, it's kind of like a guilty pleasure read, but it's such a good story. And then this is just about the art scene in New York, about like all the galleries and artists. A book about the guy who founded Tom's. Why We're Catholic by Trent Horn. I did a whole video series on this. And yeah, just all my books. Just Mercy. This was one of those life-changing books. I remember my mom gave this to me back in, when was it, like 2015 when it came out. I forgot when, but this was the first book that really opened my eyes to how horrible our system is. And Brene Brown, Carlo Broussard. Yeah, I'm seeing a theme now. I think a lot of the books that I have are just really good introduction to Catholicism. Like if you're wondering what Catholics believe and why they believe, these books are just so good for that. When I used to teach at church, these are like my catechist little manuals. And these, Father Spitzer, my mom got me these books for my birthday one year. So good. Father Spitzer is so incredible. I think he's a physicist, PhD, close connection between science, reason, and faith. Really good reading materials. And also Dr. Stacy Trasankos. She is so incredible. I met her at the Catholic Answers Faith and Science Conference, and she gave a presentation, and then I bought her book. So she's a chemist, and she worked at, I believe she was the one who, so this, if we wear spandex today, like stretchy material, she was actually the one to help formulate the stretchiness of it. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong on this, but yeah, so I thought that was so interesting. So she worked as a scientist professionally, and she had her conversion story, and she writes about faith and science. Book about jazz musicians, typography, more Catholicism. What is this? Oh, this was a book that I got from a YouTube conference I went to. It's probably super outdated, like 2012. A book about, this is one of those dollar strand books that I just found that I thought was inspirational, about business, about the co-founder of True Religion brand jeans. Saint Therese, that's a story for another day. She was stalking me earlier this year, so I just had to buy this book. Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love. Leah Darrow, she was on America's Next Top Model. She writes about beauty, such a good book. And I love this. I remember going to a bookstore, which unfortunately now is closed, but I was just browsing books, and it's this book about all these interesting things about New York City, and I was flipping through. So here I am in a bookstore in Soho, or in the Village, and I come to this page, First Cappuccino, the first cafe in America to serve cappuccino. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. JFK gave a speech on the sidewalk outside, and then I found out at the moment when I was reading this, that cafe was literally right around the corner from the bookstore I was at. You just can't make that stuff up. It's just New York magic moments. And this is a book about politics, which I actually am disappointed in this book. I was talking to someone one day and she recommended me reading this because I was talking to her. I'm like, oh, politics. Like, I really wanted to learn more about politics from a non-biased view. And she's like, oh, there's this book. It's unbiased. It's nonpartisan. Definitely read it. It'll just kind of go over everything you need to know, the basics. So I bought this book thinking, okay, it's unbiased. Of course, nothing is unbiased because every author who writes books has their perspective that they put into their writing. So yeah, it goes through like the economy, foreign policy, military, healthcare, energy. I'm like, okay, I need a book that just tells me what's what from a non-biased opinion, because everything I read online is so biased about all these things. All right, so Culture Wars. This is where I had an issue with this book. Is that what she writes is actually, I took notes. She's saying how like people who are pro-life, okay, so she's saying, I'm going to use scientific terms like embryo and fetus when referring to early stages in human development. And then she says, be aware that some opponents of legal abortion find these terms offensive. They call a fetus an unborn child and say they support the rights of the unborn. And I was like, that's false, that we're offended by scientific terms, because that's literally what the unborn is. And then she goes on to write that some do not believe that a fetus has fundamental rights until some point in development. And my question for everyone is, what point is that? Life develops as a fetus matures. Yes, obviously, but it's so vague to say that because no one really defines what point that is. Like, at what point do we determine that it's a life versus just a blob of cells? But anyway, that's my only issue with this book, so tangents. And I bought this book years ago when I first wanted to start learning about how to make better videos, so I found this really helpful. And this, I will never forget this day. When this book came out, R.L. Stine, who's the author of Goosebumps, he was speaking in Brooklyn. So I went downtown, got to meet him. So iconic. It's just so cool to meet an author that you grew up reading. And then Gay and Catholic, this book. So Eve spoke at the Sheen Center, and I heard her speak, and I was so inspired by the way that she talked about her faith, living her life, being gay and Catholic. So highly recommend this book. Her perspective is just so great to hear from. And then just another book about Catholicism, what we believe. Oh my gosh, this book, Big Magic. I reread this book several times, at least once a year. It's just about living your life as a creative. It's packed full of all these inspirational gems of wisdom from Elizabeth Gilbert, author of Eat, Pray, Love. So highly recommend this. This was my first Bible that I bought when I was having the faith crisis of what do I believe? What am I doing? I went to the store and I was like, I'll just buy this book and start reading it. And some life-changing things happened after that. Joan of Arc, another Fulton Sheen. This book, so good. This is another one of those books that I always come back to. Another book about jazz, about Miles Davis. Yeah, I think I went to this random music store one day, one of those hole-in-the-wall New York City bookstores / music stores, and I bought this, and then I bought this other jazz book. And then graphic design. This is just a random one of those Strand dollar poetry books. Sometimes I don't like buying used books because I feel like it's just not my book and I'm not supposed to have it. I might get rid of this just because, I don't know, it had this life of its own. It was someone else's book It was for, it wasn't for me. I mean, I guess it's mine now, but I don't know. I prefer buying new books rather than used. But I was like, oh, $1. It's an interesting book about poetry and sadness and saying goodbye. The way to change the world is to change your attitude towards it, not just once, but all the time. It's only when we're in love or when we're little that Christmas really comes true. In between, it can break our hearts with expectation. Oh my gosh, I think this is the reason why I bought this book. I was flipping through. I remember reading this. There's a great fear that plagues only romantics and children, is that they might be all right alone. That's what made me buy this book. I was like, I gotta read the rest of these. Yeah, I would say all my books are like self-help, graphic design, jazz, Catholicism, creativity. That's kind of the theme, if you couldn't tell by now. And then, this Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, such a good book. I remember reading this. It was like 3 a.m. I was in a diner near Grand Central Station. I would go there to just do these schoolwork all-nighters sometimes. And I remember being so struck by something. I was reading this, and he was writing about how this is like before the library system, and he lived next to a bookseller who had books, and he was like, he became friendly with the bookseller. He was able to go borrow books from him. And at the time, I was thinking, wow, today we have access to all these books, and we take it for granted. And back then, imagine being so excited because, wow, I have knowledge. I have someone that I know who can let me borrow his books. But today we can just Google anything and learn anything. The Fathers of the Church. I highly recommend everyone who's Christian learn about the early church fathers. So fascinating to think of like how Christianity started and what they believed earliest on. Like before we see our churches today, but what was it like in the very beginning, like right after Jesus? What happened and how did this all develop? What did they do? What did they believe? It's just so fascinating. And this, really good book for anyone who's into marketing or anything like that. Contagious, Why Things Catch On. Dorothy Day. So I heard Dorothy Day's granddaughter speak, and so I got to meet her. That was another amazing experience. Kate Hennessy. And then just another random bookstore find. Yeah, same thing with this. I always just go to the Strand and pick up books that seem interesting. And then this, Dr. Edward Shree. So this book is actually based on this book, Practical Applications of the Messages taught by John Paul II. And then he has another book about the Rosary. This book is really life-changing as well. He really goes deep into, he uses scripture, he talks about the Rosary and praying it more deeply. Then, wow, this actually makes me really sad. It's another New York book, Writers on Their Unshakable Love for New York. It's a collection of essays from various New Yorkers. It makes me really sad now that I'm leaving because now this is me. Documentary filmmaking, and then more Catholic books, another classic self-help about building your personal brand, being an influencer. This was actually the first author that I've met. When I was younger, I remember going to this event, and I was so excited because I met an author for the first time and had her sign a book. Well, she edited. Yeah, I just remember being so excited about this. So it's a book about music. I think it's a collection of short stories. This was a book that one of my college professors, my print production professor who worked for Scholastic, had us read this book and use it. And then Essentialism. This is such a life-changing book. It's all about, the disciplined pursuit of less. I bought this book in the beginning of 2020 before, obviously, we knew what 2020 would turn into. And it ended up being so good for me, of just my mindset and letting go of things and simplifying my life, even though 2020 kind of forced us all to simplify our lives. Mother Angelica, Fill These Hearts, Christopher West. This book, so good. My life was so changed when I heard Christopher West speak, and he signed my book, and we had such a good conversation. We'll never forget this. This is just another one of those books that is all about random facts. Jennifer Fulwiler, Your Blue Flame. I absolutely loved this book. Another 2020 book that I read that I just really needed. Fish Out of Water, Everyone Leads, another Jennifer Fulwiler's conversion story, so good. This was like one of my first YouTube books. This was early on, about online video. This was kind of when video was first blowing up, and we were seeing how influential online video was. Victor Cruz, back when he played for the Giants, his story, so good. Another Fulton Sheen. Bob Goff, Dream Big. If you watch my videos, I've talked about this before. Such a good book. Bishop Barron. He came to New York 2017, I want to say, and I saw that he was at Barnes & Noble in Midtown Manhattan, and then I went there soon after I saw he was here, because I was like, he probably signed his books, and sure enough, I got a signed copy of his book. You know, in Barnes & Noble, when they have stacks of books, it's like, oh, author signed the copy, because if they happen to be in town, they just come by and sign their books. So yeah, that was amazing. And then later, I actually got to meet him a couple years later at my job. And Susan Cain, Quiet. This book, everyone must read this book. Every single person. The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. Or if you don't read this book, at least go and watch her TED Talk, because it is life-changing. And then George Weigel, another amazing author that I got to meet. He was John Paul II's biographer. I was so amazed when I got to hear him speak, hearing him tell his personal stories about his friendship with John Paul II, and it was so incredible to meet him and hear from him. And I absolutely love this book. If you're unfamiliar, Humans of New York, a collection of photographs of people all over the city and their stories. And Benjamin Watson, Under Our Skin. This was in 2015, Getting Real About Race and Getting Free from the Fears and Frustrations That Divide Us. Benjamin Watson, he actually recently came out with a documentary about abortion, and he talks about these complex issues in such a beautiful way that is for everyone, like regardless of what you believe. Gary V, about branding, brands, DVF. This was such a good book. Diane Von Furstenberg. I'm so fascinated with people's lives. I remember when I read this book, it just so inspired me to think of age in a more beautiful way of getting older, and that I want to be the type of person to look back on my life and be like, wow, I lived an extraordinary life as an older woman, and you just look back. I think this book really first inspired me in that way. Originals, How Nonconformists Move the World, Steve Jobs. And then my bottom shelf is kind of chaotic right now, but so this was a journal that you write down one happy thing every day. So I did this for 3 years, and I like to keep it and just flip through and look back on happy memories. James Taylor from the concert, New Vintage Type, just about typography. This is actually my friend Vicky's book about finances. I need to give that back to her. My art, high school yearbooks, art, Ellis Island. So interesting to read about Ellis Island and immigration and history. The Arts of China. I remember taking a class about Asian art, so that was really interesting to learn. Just more books about graphic design. Oh, this was incredible. I went to an exhibit where he makes these sculptures out of Legos, and it's just so breathtaking when you see it in person. So just to be inspired, I bought this book so I can flip through. And then this book, How to Make Books. I remember Esther K. Smith, she visited one of my college classes, and she's one of those people that you'll just never forget. To Melanie, Make Books Not War, CCNY 2016. Just love her. So she's talking all about the process of making books, and for my senior thesis project, I actually ended up making a book, so inspired by this. And then this, one of my college professors, Mark Addison Smith, he is incredible. So he hand illustrates these beautiful lettering, and so he actually has a blog. Well, you can follow him on Instagram to see. He overhears things every day and illustrates it every single day. I remember on the first day of class, he was telling us about his project where he does that, and I keep checking in, and yeah, he has not missed a day in years. I don't know how many years, 10 years, 12 years it's been. It's just so incredible. And then a lot of coloring books, workbooks from various courses. Bible timeline, it takes you through the whole Bible, and then the Eucharist. And this is actually the DVD set that goes along with it, the Bible timeline. Highly recommend this. Jeff Caven's Great Adventure Bible Timeline program, so amazing. He just takes you through the story of the Bible. At the time, I was leading a women's group at my church, so we went through this program. So that's my main bookshelf, and then next to it I have all these extra books that just too many books to contain. So yeah, I don't think I'll go through all of these, but if you're interested and you want to see what these are, just really interesting books that I've learned a lot, been inspired from. This is actually my roommate's book, which I'm also borrowing. I need to give it back to her. And then these are mine. Gotta have your religious diversity in there. It's good to learn about other religions, not just your own. So I highly recommend everyone do that. And then these are kind of more recent books that I've bought or are currently reading, or just can't fit on my bookshelf at the moment. How to Be an Anti-Racist, Dave Ramsey. I met a guy in Union Square, and I love talking to people of other religions and just getting their perspective. And he was talking to me about Islam, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, but I love, I just love to learn. And he's like, oh, read this book. So he gave me this for free about someone who was Catholic and he converted. But the thing that made me sad is all these stories that I read, a lot of people just have a false understanding of Catholicism, and that's why they leave the church, or they didn't have a good experience with it. And so I think a lot of people leave their Catholic faith and they don't truly know what it is that they're leaving, which makes me really sad, which I have all these Catholic books, as you see, but I just encourage everyone to learn more about their faith and understand what it is you believe and why you believe it. Don't just blindly follow what your parents believe or what people tell you should believe. Just learn for yourself, figure it out on your own. That's kind of where this journey has led me to, of like when I first started, and then I just kept getting more books and reading more and learning more. And then I actually became a catechist at my church to teach. So I started teaching 6th grade and then 7th and 8th. This was our textbook that we used. Yeah, I loved the textbook that we used for our class. I love it because it actually shows diversity, and it's not just like a white Jesus depiction that you see in the artwork especially. And I just loved having the students see these beautiful artworks and learn about Jesus and teach them about Jesus. And I'm sad that I'm leaving New York now and I didn't get a chance to meet this artist, Laura James. I wanted to speak with her or like maybe interview her or do a video or something about her, but I looked her up and she had an interview that I found online.
I was a young person and I was not always interested in listening to the pastor, and I would look at my Bible, my children's Bible, and it was filled with pictures. We had the Bible and I had this children's book in my house, which it not only was it racially biased, but it was actually like overtly racist, I think. Yes. Even though I didn't really realize that then, but you can see that the black people are actually represented as, they look kind of ape-like, and it's not cool.
Yeah, just how beautiful is this? Laura James. And then this, I loved this. My mom gave this to me for my 16th birthday. She had friends and family write letters, so she compiled it into this binder, which is what I did my senior thesis project that I mentioned, the book that I put together. Took those letters and made my own book out of it. And yeah, I also have playbills, which can be a story for another day. All the Broadway shows that I've been to. My roommate Bridget recently did a video where she went into detail of all the stories of the Broadway shows that she went to in her playbills, so maybe I'll have to do that for a separate video. That was my bookshelf tour. I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos every time I post. And I'll see you in my next video.